So if you have not heard by now, it appears that all of the delegates have decided to choose Kamala Harris as the nominee. Now, I have a lot to break down here, but we're going to start with where she sat with Black voters in 2020. So we're going to start with that. And just as a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, shout out to my comrade Nick from Revolutionary Blackout Network. Kamala Harris in the primaries only had 1% Black support. This is the person liberals think will turn out Black voters. Just a reminder for those who forgot, because Nick always has receipts. Harris' support drops among Black voters. She was at 1%, right? So for all the things they said about Bernie Sanders, he had more support among the Black community than Kamala Harris did. So obviously, this is a problem for Kamala Harris. It's not just the fact that she couldn't get a delegate in her home state of California. She apparently did not appeal to the Black community. And one thing about us, I would say more so maybe the bougie, the Black boule may really like Kamala Harris. I don't know too many working class Black folks that's trying to rock with Kamala like that, because they kind of see her as fake and phony. Like, I'm just keeping it real. So keep that in mind when you think about the fact that these delegates just decided to they just picked who they wanted to be. And I told you again, the DNC is a corporation. They can choose the candidate. They can decide who the nominee is going to be, with or without our votes. Now, apparently, this is what's going to shock you. Black Lives Matter grassroots network, Black Lives Matter global network, not grassroots, but the global network, the one that got all that money, they are not happy with the DNC's decision to just select Kamala Harris. And they apparently have issued a statement about this. They go through the timeline of the events here. Sunday, Joe Biden drops out. Kamala Harris announces campaign with Biden endorsement. Kamala Harris says she is going to work hard to earn the nomination. Kamala Harris makes calls to party delegates. Monday, Kamala Harris continues making calls to party delegates. Kamala Harris makes 2 public speeches. AP announces Kamala Harris has secured enough delegates to be the Democrat nominee. Kamala Harris releases this statement noting she has worked hard to go out and earn the nomination as promised on Monday night. A 24-hour process of talking to party bosses is not democratic, nor is it a process Democrats should be proud of. We do not live in a dictatorship. Delegates are not oligarchs, except they are. So apparently BLM didn't get the memo from the DNC fraud lawsuit, where the judge determined that the DNC did nothing wrong with Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign because the DNC is a corporation. They are allowed to select the nominee, and there's nothing you can do about that. Goes on to say, installing Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee and an unknown vice president without any public voting process would make the modern Democratic Party a party of hypocrites. We call on the DNC to create a process that allows for public participation in the nomination process, not just a nomination by party delegates. This don't look good, bruh. That does not look good. That the DNC is being called out by BLM. I mean, and look, I have my disagreements with BLM with all that money and stuff. I had my disagreements about that and the way that they tried to just take the name from the grassroots organization and go make millions of dollars. But they're correct here. Nobody voted for Kamala. Did you vote for Kamala Harris? Did you vote for Kamala? I didn't vote for Kamala Harris. Nobody voted for Kamala Harris. But yet she's the nominee. The oligarchs, they just pick who they want. Just pick who they want. So there's already pushback from BLM, and they made a public statement, not just on Twitter, also on their website as well. And just like that, she got the delegates, they all lined up and went along with her. And then what makes it worse, and this should be a big red flag to all of you, Wall Street got in line and supported Kamala Harris. Listen to this.
Semaphore also reporting, quote, the Wall Street money machine is roaring back to life with names like Peter Orszag, Blackstone's Jonathan Gray, and Roger Altman, all of them expected to give their support to Harris. We're also getting reaction from the global business community as well, including LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman, backing Harris to be the next president of the United States. Also, we're hearing from other investors who say now is the time to get a more moderate candidate who can easily beat Donald Trump.
Pause. Does everybody hear what he said? So Reid Hoffman is a billionaire, by the way. So you got the billionaires backing you. And then you have this gentleman here who just said that it's great to have a moderate candidate, which is what I've said to people over and over again. Kamala Harris is the moderate. She's a moderate. She's not progressive. I'm tired of people like all these people coming out right now saying she's progressive. She's not. And when you look at where she stands on policy, you will see that she's not progressive. She's a moderate Democrat and establishment. So with Wall Street coming out, that's a big red flag.
We're also hearing from Microsoft President Brad Smith thanking Biden for his service, but he did not mention the vice president. Also, Box CEO Aaron Levy posting in part, the Democratic Party has a clear window to create a superior platform and story that is pro-tech, AI, science, immigration, and entrepreneurship, adding, quote, I hope and expect they will take this newfound opportunity seriously.
So once Wall Street gets in line, you know where that candidate stands. So everybody think about that for just a second. That is very troubling. But if you go back and you look at Kamala Harris's record, you would understand how we got here. Let's start with Willie Brown. All right, we're going to take it all the way back to San Francisco. We're taking it back to the streets, boo. Former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown writes about dating Kamala Harris, appointing her to posts. Now, I don't really care about the dating and all that hoo-ha, but I do want to get to the appointments. Listen to this. Yes, we dated. It was more than 20 years ago, wrote Brown, who said he had been peppered with calls from the national media about the relationship with Kamala Harris, particularly since it became obvious that she was going to run for president. We going back. Let's go down here. Brown was married at the time, and Harris dated. He and Harris dated. But because he was estranged from his wife, the relationship was not kept secret. And a Sacramento Bee reporter told people that Brown had a succession of girlfriends and would go to a party with his wife on one arm and his girlfriend on another. Now it goes on to say here, a 1994 LA Times report about then California Assembly Speaker Brown rushed to hand patronage jobs described Harris as Brown's frequent companion. That report also cited a column from Chronicle's Herb Caen that called Harris the speaker's new steady. When they met, she was 29 and Brown was 60. I think we all know what that relationship was really about. So when people get on me and they say, oh, Sabs, don't say she slept her way to the top. Nah, this is what happened. That she was 29, he was 60. He had things to offer her for her career, and she had something to offer him. Look, we're adults. We're all adults here. We know how this works. Now, it goes on to say the couple split up in 1995, which flabbergasted those who found Kamala the perfect antidote to whatever playboy tendencies still resided in the mayor-elected jaunty persona. Although Brown supported Harris in her successful 2003 run for San Francisco district attorney, she tried to distance herself from him in that race, telling San Francisco Weekly that Brown, whose career was dogged by corruption allegations, was an albatross hanging around my neck. So now all of a sudden, he's an albatross. He a problem for her now. She goes on to say this, his career is over. I will be alive and kicking for the next 40 years. I do not owe him a thing. If there is corruption, it will be prosecuted. Everybody hear this? Among the issues that followed Harris from her time with Brown was the allegation of cronyism in his appointment of her and two well-paying posts. Yes, I may have influenced her career by appointing her to two state commissions when I was Assembly Speaker. So again, her relationship with Willie Brown was to elevate her political career. So he appointed her to two positions. Brown appointed Harris to the California Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board and then to the Medical Assistance Commission, positions that paid her more than $400,000 over 5 years. Brown also gave Harris a BMW. And I certainly helped her with her first race for district attorney in San Francisco. You hear all this? I have also helped the careers, get this, folks, of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Gavin Newsom, Senator Dianne Feinstein, and a host of other politicians. Well, I sincerely hope Nancy and all the rest of them didn't have to sleep with Willie too. I hope not. The difference is that Harris is the only one who, after I helped her, sent word that I would be indicted if I so much as jaywalked while she was a DA. That's politics for you. Because Willie Brown was a black man, and Kamala Harris was known for indicting a lot of black people. Let's look at a couple more things that I think people just may not be familiar with. Shout out to Consortium for this. Kamala Harris' distinguished career of serving in justice. And some of these I've already talked about, so I want to highlight certain ones. This is from Marjorie Cohn from Consortium News. So it was originally published 2019, and then this was posted again under Sheer Post. So we want to go to, I talked about that one before. There's two of them here that I want to highlight. I think it's this one. This part right here. Harris opposed investigations of police shootings. These cases are not isolated examples of Harris' less than progressive record as a prosecutor. Time after time, when progressives urged her to embrace criminal justice reforms as a district attorney and then the state attorneys general, Ms. Harris opposed them or stayed silent. Now, for all the people like Roland Martin that were kind of yelling at people on Twitter the other day and telling black people to get in line and support Kamala Harris, I say this again, Kamala Harris has not been a friend to the black community. So why should black voters have to get in line to support her? She was against criminal justice reforms. You know how many lives she ruined, how many black lives she ruined? And I'm not talking about black people that have money. I'm talking about working class black people. So once again, this is another example that showed you that Kamala Harris was not a friend to the working class, the people who didn't have the money to pay bail and get out. It goes on to say here, most troubling, Ms. Harris fought tooth and nail to uphold wrongful convictions that had been secured through official misconduct that included evidence tampering, false testimony, and the suppression of crucial information by prosecutors. See, these are the type of things like when people say, what is, Kamala Harris, that she would, destroy Trump in a debate because Trump is a felon, right? If it were me and I were debating Kamala Harris, all I have to do is pull up her record. That's all I have to do. And it goes on to say here, after a federal judge ruled in 2014 that California's death penalty system had become so dysfunctional, it violated the Eighth Amendment's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment, Harris appealed the decision. As a result, California's death penalty was upheld and remains in place today. Now, that's supposed to be a right-wing position, right? So for the people who called her progressive, how is that progressive? It's not. Harris refused DNA testing that could exonerate Kevin Cooper, a likely innocent man on death row, and she opposed statewide body-worn police cams. Now think about the story I just told you about Sonia Massey and the body cams. Kamala Harris opposed police officers wearing body cams. Like I said, she's always been a friend to the police, not to the people, but definitely not the black people. She has no attachment to the black community. And don't come at me and say, oh, well, she was an AKA. Yeah, in college, she was an AKA. And there have been times, and I've been in college, there have been a number of people that have been in black sororities and fraternities that were not black. When I was in high school, there was a white girl that was a Zeta. There was a white guy that was an Alpha. So let's stop with all that. Just because she was in a black sorority doesn't mean she had that connection to the black community. She doesn't. Let's go on. Harris favored criminalizing truancy, raising cash bail fees, and keeping prisoners locked up for cheap labor. Again, here's another labor issue with Kamala Harris. She also supported arresting undocumented juveniles to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This is ICE. Covering for corrupt police lab technicians and blocking gender confirmation surgery for a transgender prisoner. A U.S. District Court judge concluded that withholding the surgery constituted cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the Eighth Amendment. Many of Harris's prosecutorial actions disproportionately hurt people of color. And if you go even further there, mainly black people. But Roland Martin will tell you black people get in line and come support this woman, boo. Then there was this conversation with the griot. Oh, how can one forget? This conversation here with the griot where Kamala Harris was asked about reparations. Listen to this.
One of the questions that the black community has is, Senator Harris, if you are elected president, what would be your agenda for the black community?
Right.
We know that black Americans are arrested at higher rates for marijuana. Right. We're denied mortgages when we, loans for mortgages. Right. There's a wealth disparity. So how do you help the black community from the White House?
That's right. Well, the first step is to understand that the needs of black folks are the needs of everyone, and the needs of everyone are the needs of black folks. It is also equally important to understand that this is a country that had over 200 years of slavery, had Jim Crow, had legalized segregation and discrimination, and now de facto segregation and discrimination. And so while our needs are like everyone else's in terms of we want our babies to be born healthy and live a happy and productive life, we care about issues of climate change, we care about issues of national security, we also know that when you look at disparities around wealth, around home ownership, around education, around who is stopped, arrested, and incarcerated in this country, there are huge disparities based on race. And that.
Okay. So this is a kicker, because she admits right here that there are those disparities based on race. She just gave you a number of examples. She admits all of that. One thing I disagree with when she said the needs are the same, the needs are not the same. You can tell that by the healthcare system, where black women are dying during childbirth at a completely disproportional rate compared to other women in this country. So the needs are not necessarily the same. But she admits it's disproportionately unfair, unequal. Now listen to the rest of this.
That has to be dealt with. So part of my proposal in terms of the agenda, specifically for black folks, is about what we need to do, for example, around maternal mortality. I have actually sponsored a bill and intend, as President of the United States, to make sure it is passed around recognizing that black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth. And when you study the issue, you know that it is not about the education level of somebody. It is not about their socioeconomic level. It is literally about their race. Remember what happened to Serena. It is literally about racial bias in the medical health professions.
Mm-hmm.
But she just told you the needs are the same. So you see what I'm saying? Do you see what's happening here? The needs are not the same, right? Now she says she has a bill to make sure that you recognize that there's disparity between for Black women that are, pregnant. What the fuck does recognize do? What you gonna do about it? What are you gonna do about it? Recognize. I mean, I recognize that we have inflation. What are you gonna do about it? What are they gonna do about it? You recognize that not everybody in this country has health insurance. You recognize that some people are underinsured. What are they going to do about it? What do you mean you make a bill to recognize? What? Okay, let's go on.
That cause people to not take Black women seriously when they walk into the door of that hospital or that emergency room in terms of how they talk about what they need. The agenda includes HBCUs, for example. I am a proud graduate of Howard University. I know that our HBCUs have raised and helped raise generations of leaders in this country and do it in a very special way that is about nurturing and about creating high standards and challenging young people to be their best, not giving them any excuse, but giving them all kinds of support. So we need to do more. Yeah, I'm right now working on, and actually got it out of the Senate, and the House passed it around giving more money to HBCUs around their historic landmarks. But there's more to be done around creating incentives for more young people to go into the STEM professions through HBCUs. There is what we need to do around the point that you were raising about the economic disparities. I have a proposal that will be my first order of business when elected president, that is about lifting up middle-class working families. And what I'm proposing specifically is that families that are making $100,000 or less would get a tax credit that they would receive at up to $500 a month. This proposal, economists across the board have said, would be the most significant middle-class tax cut for American families and generations, and it would lift up 60% of Black families out of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does everybody see what she just did? Because this is a trick that a lot of Democrat politicians do when they're asked about reparations. You start off talking about what the Black community needs, particularly those that are descendants of slavery. She's not, by the way, she's not. You start off talking about that, and then all of a sudden you switch it to lifting up all these other people. Now all of a sudden it's the Lift Act where we lift up everybody. And I'm not against lifting up everybody. But the question is, what are you going to do for the Black community? Let's continue, folks.
So it does touch Black families.
Oh, absolutely. Directly.
About the
directly. Mm-hmm. Because when you look at the proportionality of where Black families are, you see it in terms of housing and home ownership. Mm-hmm. Where white families, something, I'm going to get this generally right, but something around 70% of white families own their homes versus somewhere around 40% for Black families. Yeah. So you don't have to look very hard to see that disparities exist. Mm-hmm. But you also don't have to look very hard to see this, that when we're talking about families, regardless of their color,
here we
they
go.
have an equal desire to work hard, to love their children, and allow them to have a pathway and an equal pathway to success. Black mothers, white mothers of whatever race, wake up in the middle of the night worrying about their children and their health and their well-being, and we need to address that. But I will say there's another issue that we need to address that's specific to Black families, and that is this. We cannot have a society where a father or a mother, by the time their son turns about 12 years old, has to sit down and have the talk with him about how he will be stopped or chased or arrested or even killed because of the color of his skin. And
she was the cop. She was the cop. Everybody understand this? Okay.
So how do you intend to change that from the White House? How would you change policy around that?
Part of it is that the president makes a decision about who's going to run the United States Department of Justice. Currently, under this administration, they have shut down the pattern and practice investigations that involve investigating police departments that have a pattern and practice of discrimination. Those need to be reopened and revived with vigor, because no American should want that a police department that has a history and a pattern and practice of discrimination should be able to get away with that without consequence and accountability. Another issue is what happens through the Department of Justice around consent decrees, which are basically a requirement that police departments that have a history of that kind of behavior, they're under a court order for supervision. This Department of Justice has essentially shut those down.
Right.
First order of business would be to revive those.
Okay, now hold on to that there for just a second, because I want to show you another question that's a part of that interview about reparations in particular. Now, you just heard her say all of that about the disparity and all that jazz. But when she is pushed back on about reparations, this is what she says.
So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit Black people. No, because whatever benefits that Black family will benefit that community and society as a whole and the country. Right? So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit Black people. No, because whatever benefits that Black family will benefit that community and society as a whole and the country. Right?
But this is who Roland Martin is telling Black people to get behind, right? And she made it very clear to you back then, she was not going to do something that would only benefit the Black community, even though she just explained to you all those disparities. Now, I did a little bit of math, and I want to show you why this is particularly important when we talk about the wealth gap, and we'll get back to the other stuff about crazy Kamala. Now, this is from the Urban Org. Listen to this. Wealth gaps by race and ethnicity are large, right? So I just wanted to show you this graph so you'll know where I got my numbers from when I show you the next picture. Okay, so it shows you again, you have Asian Americans up here, you have white Americans next, and then Hispanic Americans, and then you have Black Americans here at the bottom. The wealth gap that we have by race and ethnicity. And yes, it is significantly large. You can see that on the chat. Now, by Kamala Harris standards, and Bernie Sanders had this too, and this is something I disagreed with when I supported Bernie's campaign. By Kamala Harris standards, come back, we'll bring it back in. She believes that if you lift up everyone, just give it to everybody, and then it'll all be equal. And that way you're lifting up everyone. So here's what I believe. I believe in the universal policies. I think everyone should have health care. I think everyone should have a decent education in this country. I believe in all of that. I believe in lifting up the people. However, there is a difference between equality and equity. And I want to show you what that looks like. Now, those numbers, I pulled them from that Urban Org report about wealth in this country based on race. And I want to show you what happens when you do what Kamala said. Just give everybody the same thing and lift up. So I put the numbers here. For Asian Americans, according to that report, the average family wealth here was over 1.8 million. For white Americans, over 1.3 million. For Hispanic Americans, over 227,000. For Black Americans, over 211,000, right? Okay, so we can see the disparities there. Now, I would have gone further than Kamala. Kamala's like, we're going to give them some tax breaks and that's going to help the middle class. Nah, bruh. I was just like, what would happen if we just gave everybody $10,000 a year, sort of like a UBI? Right? We just gave everybody $10,000. It said, just have at it. There's extra $10K in your pocket. You could dish it out by the months, whatever. So I went further. And I want to show you the difference between equality and equity. Equally, I gave everybody $10,000. However, when you do the math, you will see that the equity is not there. Even though I gave everyone $10,000, if you notice, now the Asian American average family wealth is 1.819 million. For white Americans, 1.371 million. So everybody's getting that 10,000 increase. Hispanic Americans over 237,000 now, and Black Americans over 221,000 now. If you'll notice, I have the total for Black American family wealth in red, and there's a reason why I did that. Because what it shows you is that when you give everybody the equal amount, that same amount for everybody, that does not close the racial wealth gap. Because as you can see, Black Americans are still at the bottom. Even though I gave them $10,000, just like I gave $10,000 to Asian Americans, white Americans, and Hispanic Americans. But Black American families are still going to be at the bottom. Does everybody understand why this is an issue? So we are not to say you can't do any type of universal policies. I support them. But when Kamala Harris talks about this disproportion between different groups in the United States based on race because everyone did not get an equal footing, she's right about that. But she's not trying to close the racial wealth gap. So in short, Kamala Harris may agree that there should be some type of repair, but Kamala Harris does not agree with implementing cash reparations for descendants of slavery in this country. There is no way that Black families, will say descendant of slavery, there's no way that they are going to catch up to white families or Asian families just because you gave everybody $10,000. And this, this had to grow on me. I had to grow up and learn. Because when Bernie was running, I said, yeah, give everybody health care and everybody should be all the same. And, I had to educate myself about this. When you do the math, you will see it's not equitable. So it's not enough to have equality. You also need equity. This is what people like Kamala Harris don't want to acknowledge. This is what Bernie Sanders didn't want to acknowledge. They don't want to lift up Black people enough to put us on the same level as white people economically. That's what it is, God damn it. And they don't want to do it because they're afraid they're going to get pushback from their white base. Kamala knows this. Let's keep it real. And she is not a descendant of slavery. However, she has no problem wanting to do something for other groups. You see, because here's Kamala Harris at an AIPAC event. Listen to this.
Our defense relationship is critical to both nations, which is why I support the United States' commitment to provide Israel with $38 billion in military assistance over the next decade. Our defense relationship is critical to both nations, which is why I support the United States' commitment to provide Israel with $38 billion in military assistance over the next decade.
So, and this isn't the only thing. Do you think Kamala Harris would get up on stage? You think Kamala Harris in an interview would say that Holocaust survivors should give their reparations back? Where was that same push to let's lift up everybody when Japanese Americans that were part of the internment camps received cash reparations, but descendants of slaves? Where was that same push? Where were all those same people that's like, let's just give it to everybody? Where was that? Where was it, people? Tell me, let me know. Let me know. And this is one of the problems that I have with politicians like her. And it's not just her. Richie Torres is the same way. All of these politicians that may look like Black Americans, but are actually not, they get out there and they will push harder for another group. But when it comes to Black Americans, it's all of a sudden we can't really do anything. Nothing that's just for them. But you can do it for other groups. She not the only one. Like I said before, Richie Torres, you add him to that equation too, damn it. James Clyburn, I support HB 140. That bill doesn't give out cash reparations to descendants of slavery. You come ask him about reparations and he yells at you and snaps in your damn face. But if you come to him and you say, would you support giving some extra support for Holocaust survivors? He smiles and says, no problem. People need to talk about this. And you can point to this as questionable as well. One of the potential VP picks that Kamala Harris is entertaining, Governor Josh Shapiro. This guy supported a bipartisan bill that would block colleges and universities from receiving state funding if they boycott or make divestments from Israel. That's one of the guys she's considering as running mate. Everybody see this? Okay, this is why stop. That all the people who coming up with all this defense for Kamala, stop. Should be no different than Joe Biden with this Israel policy. And that's the other thing. I have noticed quite a number of people all of a sudden that were pro-Palestinian, that were for Palestinian liberation, that were out in the streets calling Joe Genocide Joe. All of a sudden, these people are like, yeah, Kamala, I can get on board with that. That would be so much better. Really? As if Kamala Harris isn't the same cloth. As if Kamala Harris isn't doing what Abby Martin is calling out here. Biden leaves office a disgraced war criminal, but let's make no illusions about where Kamala stands on Israel. Regular AIPAC speaker compared Selma and the U.S. civil rights struggle to her pro-Israel activism, called BDS anti-Semitic, co-sponsored resolution against Obama in support of illegal settlements. Former campaign director says her support for Israel is central to who she is. Hosted White House events promoting Israel's atrocity propaganda about October 7th. Yes, she's been spreading that lie about the Hamas essay. After calling for immediate ceasefire in March, clarified she meant Biden's temporary pause. Biden officials say there's no dispute on policy between Biden and Harris on Gaza. So the young people, we got to have a conversation because there seems to be some type of confusion here. And it is very clear. Some of y'all have done your research on Kamala Harris. This woman's policy when it comes to Israel is no different. She is pro-Israel. She is not in support of this so-called Palestinian liberation that you want to try to achieve and accomplish. And as a matter of fact, when you look at both of them, both Trump and Kamala are AIPAC shills. Both of them. If you support, and this is why I said, if you support Palestinian liberation, you will not get it from them. You won't. Look at the numbers, folks. Kamala Harris has taken over $5 million from AIPAC. That they don't hand out that kind of cash for you to be against Israel. Donald Trump, over $1 million from AIPAC. These people are AIPAC shills. Now, that's one thing that Kamala has in common with Donald Trump. Pro-Israel, AIPAC. And if you think that Kamala Harris is going to sit up here and push back on Netanyahu and not give him something that he wants, you are sadly mistaken. Kamala Harris will have that meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, and I bet you he'll leave this country with some more damn money. So that tells me the American people have not truly woken up like I thought that they had. Because somehow they think that Kamala's different when it comes to Israel, and she's not. One other thing they have in common. Trump and Kamala are also pro-police. So for all of you that oppose the cop cities that are being built, you probably shouldn't be supporting Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Now, I said I just gave you two similarities of Trump and Kamala. If you have more, drop below. Eric said both are tools of the billionaire class. Roger said how much time you got. I don't know if he said anything. Yes. the Steve Mnuchin connection. Both in pocket with big money interests. Both have no intention of extending TRICARE to the rest of the population, canceling federal contracts with companies who engage in union busting. Neither will raise the minimum wage to a living wage, matching the cost of living and pegging it down to the cost of living. I doubt neither of them would bring down these rents. The Steve Mnuchin one is a big one with Kamala Harris. There was another one from Colin, if I can find it again. Did I pass Colin? He changed his picture. I'm sorry. There it is. No reparations. That's what I'm trying to tell you guys. These people aren't as different as you think that they are, especially when it comes to the establishment and the ruling class. Now you got Tulsi Gabbard out here, and she out here calling out Kamala Harris again, calling out her record. And I got a lot of criticism of Tulsi Gabbard because I think she's just an opportunist herself. It just is what it is. But she's correct about Kamala's record. So here we go again. It's Tulsi and Kamala round two.
The fact that they're touting President Joe Biden making this decision as doing what's best for the country, it's just hypocrisy, given how many of them, as you mentioned, have been saying for days that he should step down as the Democratic nominee. I think the thing here to focus on, Jesse, is all of these different calls and questions come up about what happens next. Whether Joe Biden is, actually resigns or he doesn't, we just got to remember nothing's going to change. If Kamala Harris is the nominee or some other Democrat is the nominee, nothing else is going to change. Joe Biden has been the figurehead for people behind the scenes who have been calling the shots. The same will happen if Kamala Harris is elected president or other Democrats. The fact is we've got unelected power elite in Washington coming from the military-industrial complex, national security state, working with their friends in the big industrial propaganda media. They all just want to stay in power. So they don't really actually care at all about Joe Biden, no matter how many crocodile tears they shed. They're going to look for the best horse that they think will help them win and back that person.
So the thing is, again, there are things that she said there that's true, but at the same time, that could also be applied to the Republican Party as well. They're all in bed with the billionaire class and the establishment. They're not really running things either. Now we go and flip to some of these polls. This recent Quinnipiac poll, this was released the 22nd, so that was yesterday. We're going to dive down to the young voters. This is what I want people to see. Because this is the one where I was like, oh, snap. And I don't know why their thing is so. Here we go, right here. Is this the one? 18 to 34-year-olds, but I need the one with Harris. Sorry, guys. Okay, here we go. We're getting to the Harris part. Okay. According to the Quinnipiac poll, we're going to look at a couple of polls. This Quinnipiac poll that was posted yesterday, when it comes to the youth vote, 18 to 34, Kamala Harris has 39% and Trump has 58%. That's the Quinnipiac poll. So all these polls have different results. So just FYI. So that was that one, 18 to 34. Now we're going to move forward to the YouGov poll. Now, the YouGov poll says among young voters 18 to 29. So there is an age difference here. The Quinnipiac poll is 18 to 34. This one's 18 to 29. This poll shows Kamala Harris at 58% and Donald Trump at 33% with young voters. So we're going to have to wait to see a couple more polls later on, because like I said, these are two different polls that have very different results. So there's that. But the YouGov poll is showing that she's seeing an increase with the younger people, at least as of today. And then there is this poll. Now, this is by Reuters. Harris leads Trump 44% to 42% in the U.S. presidential race. So this is a new poll that was released today. And so now they're showing that she is beating Donald Trump. I don't want to bring this back up here. Sorry. She's beating Donald Trump by 2 points. Joe Biden was not. So she has moved up in the polls. She's doing better. She's polling better than Joe Biden so far. We will continue to watch the polls. Now, remember, this is the popular vote. This is the national vote. I'm waiting to see the swing state votes because that is ultimately what determines who wins the election, is who is going to win those swing states. That's what it comes down to. So when those are released, then I'll tell you about those. But right now, Kamala Harris is now beating Donald Trump in the polls. Now, of course, I get it. They didn't poll everybody. I know you guys are going to tell me this. They only poll people certain ages. Totally get that and understand. But I still got to report this. Still got to report this. So, and sometimes, again, that's not uncommon with a new announcement that has just happened, right? Now, the betting odds on Polymarket, this is interesting. Now, these are betting odds, okay? This is not a poll. The betting odds on Polymarket has Trump at 63% and Kamala Harris at 36%. Now, one thing I do want to remind everyone of, if we want to go back in time, let's all remember the poll said that Hillary Clinton was beating Donald Trump. And I think where a lot of people got lost is that, again, that is the popular vote. That's not the electoral college vote, which is supposed to follow the popular vote, but whatever. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You don't really know. So there's all that. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the swing states. So I will need to check and see how she is performing in those swing states now that she is determined that she is the nominee and not Joe Biden. But one thing I hope you've gathered from this conversation is that Kamala Harris is not progressive. She's pro-police. She's pro-Israel. So I don't know what people think that they're going to get from her that they didn't already have with Joe Biden. But you're looking at a female Barack Obama. And I feel it all over again. I see all this energy and everyone's like, we're cheered up. We're so excited. Oh my God. Oh my God. I saw it with Barack Obama. And then I saw a lot of disappointment.